It's here. It's day 1 of practicing witchcraft.
So, what now?
It might sound a little bit unhinged, but we're starting off strong with... Are you ready? Deity veneration. Wait, don't run away now. You might have heard witches don't have to venerate any god, or witchcraft is secular, blah blah blah. Well, I'm here to tell you that's wrong. All witches venerate one common god. The rest of them might be different from case to case, or there's witches that indeed choose to never venerate another god ever again. However, there is this one god that all witches venerate. So, on day 1, meet your new god, the god of research. He's a thirsty little thing, and he requires regular and consistent sacrifices, so make sure you don't upset him. So in the name of the god of research, I decided to compile every piece of advice that I picked up from watching all of these videos about advice to beginner witches, or what I wish I knew at the beginning of my practice, and put them all into one gigantic list. So you don't have to. This list is complete with all my personal experiences and any additional things I may have thought about or uncovered along the way, and I will leave all the channels and videos that I have sourced in the description below if you're curious. So let's begin. Being a witch is not genetic. You don't inherit being a witch. You might instead inherit some psychic abilities,
Like premonitory visions into the most boring moments of your life.
but being a witch requires you to at least practice a craft involving magic and connecting to other energies, especially earthly energies, and the continuous study of the craft. So even if you don't do spells all day every day, you're still a witch. You're not a witch on a break or a witch on vacation. It's a lifestyle. So if your nana was a witch, that doesn't mean you are a witch. Just as if your parents are artists, if you're not doing any art, that doesn't mean you are an artist. And if you think about folk magic and traditional witchcraft and where they come from, it's very likely that you've had at least one witch in your family line. I personally think that Lavender Hazelwood has put it perfectly in her video called What Does It Mean to Be a Witch? So go watch it. It's short, it's sweet, it's in the description. The term witch is gender neutral. Pretty self-explanatory, I think, but the term witch is not just for women. Anyone of any gender can be a witch. But at the same time, there are people who do practices similar to witchcraft, or even what you would be able to call witchcraft, but they reject the term witch. So if somebody calls themselves a witch, call them a witch. If they don't, don't. Magic has its limits, just as you have your own limits. If you think magic is an instant fix for anything and everything, you might want to remind yourself that you're human and you're bound by a human body in a material world. Control what you can to influence what you cannot. That's about everything you can do in this world. But you can think of magic and witchcraft like steroids. It can greatly increase your capabilities, but in the bounds of your human existence. I know that we like saying that athletes, and especially athletes on steroids, are breaking the limits, but the truth is that athletes on steroids are simply pushing the limit of what a person can usually express from what their physical body is actually capable of. But they're not actually breaking through the limits of their physical body. Their physical body will break first before that happens. And since we're on the steroid analogy, you can take all the steroids you want, but if you don't actually work out and train, and in most cases you have to train even harder than normal, so you can actually reach beyond what your physical body can show, then you won't get any results. Your body will just break down from an excess of substances that it doesn't actually need. And it's the same for witchcraft. If you don't put in the effort towards what you want your magic to achieve, if you don't do your part, well then your practice won't achieve any results. And if it does, it will probably be minimal. Your magic won't carry you to victory. So before you go into witchcraft, check your expectations of what witchcraft and magic can actually do. I personally had no expectations, and that is just as bad, because doubt can kill your magical gains. There is no white or black magic. It's easy to think in black and white. It's safe. If one thing is good, the opposite is bad. If one thing is evil, it cannot possibly be good. It's a nice way for us to order things. It's a way to make the unknown controllable. But we forget one thing. These two sides that we tend to force things into, they exist at the same time inside everything around us. If you've been in the witchcraft community for like 5 minutes, you've probably heard of the saying, as above, so below. Well, it's not just because it sounds good. It portrays the duality that's all around us. Everything has two sides, and everything you do will have a simultaneous, equal, and opposite reaction or consequence. Some of you might have heard of it as every action has an equal reaction in the opposite direction. Physics.
So what does this mean?
It means that anything you do, even if you intend for it to have a certain effect, you will cause the opposite effect as well to be able to achieve the effect that you wish for. So let's take a really popular example. You need a job, so you apply for jobs. You eventually get an interview for a job that you really want. And you think about it and decide, let's take some magical steroids to boost my chances of getting this job. And it works. Congratulations. You got the job. But what happened on the other side? On the other side, there was an applicant who also really needed a job. An applicant who was maybe even better suited for the job than you were. This applicant lost the job. What you did was you boosted your chances, you made it so you can get the job, but at the same time, you also caused the other person to lose the job. As above, so below. You might choose to believe that the other person's fate will take care of them and that they'll eventually find a job that's even better for them. But that doesn't change the effect of your spell. Everything has two sides and everything has consequences. And while we're on this topic, everything has a price. Nothing comes for free. Maybe you know about offerings given to deities, to spirits that you work with in exchange for their involvement in your working. It's kind of a payment for the favor that they're doing for you. But it doesn't stop there. If you think about it, when you're doing a spell or a ritual, it doesn't really matter. You're using ingredients. They have energy. Using those ingredients for this particular spell means that you are already giving into this spell something. You're using your own energy. You're using maybe the elements. You're using materials as well with their own energy. Putting all of this into the spell or the ritual is already paying a price for an effect to happen. Bigger spells require a bigger price, require more energy, require more involvement and more sacrifice from your part. And even those offerings that you're giving in exchange for a favor, it's something you sacrifice and give to this entity. So this entity sacrifices their own energy for your intent. But ultimately, witchcraft is just a tool that's solely dependent on its practitioner, who is the one who weighs the pros and cons of doing this working and who gives it purpose through their intent. Doubt is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Doubt and fear are a witch's enemies because they obliterate our intent. Doubt will make your magic weak and ineffective, while retaining a healthy dose of skepticism means that you won't lose your critical thinking abilities. Doubt will render your spells useless. How can your spells do anything if you yourself deny their power? Letting go of doubt in most cases means letting go in general. So what if it's not real? If it's bringing you what you want, does it really matter? It might just be in your head, but that just means that you're stronger than you thought you were. Does it really matter if it works and it helps you? It sounds to me like you just discovered the way in which you can achieve what you want. Now, fear will make you both doubt yourself and obsess over the wrong things. Unreasonable, uncontrolled fear is the gateway to insanity. The god of research is unforgiving and it's demanding sacrifice. Look up shadow work. Actually, just consider therapy, because shadow work is not for everyone and maybe there's a different therapy technique that might suit you better. And since we're talking about therapy, there is another thing that might impede your magical path, and that is religious trauma. It might not always stop you from using your magic effectively, but it might make you shy away from practices simply because they might allude to practices of religious people that have traumatized you in the past. And that's something I relate to, and it's something that I did not want to address, initially at least. So I was subconsciously restricting my options, and that eventually came to bite me, and I was forced to confront all of it. So I think that it's better for you to voluntarily confront something and process something instead of being forced into it. And let's not forget, witchcraft is also about connecting to new energies with different boundaries, different rules, different perspectives. So your attitude towards relationships and attachments will play a leading role in how you deal with all of this. So, therapy. Think about it. Cross-reference your resources. Check your information through different sources. Books are a smidgen more trustworthy than your random Google article, but keep in mind, AI books now exist. And I think at this point we can all understand that AI is basically a database that it's been fed, and then it mixes it all up according to some keywords. And it might or might not make sense. But it also means that in some cases, it might not make the difference between fiction and non-fiction. So imagine this, you're reading a book and you think it actually has answers for your questions. It thinks that it has pertinent information to the field that you're asking those questions about. And instead, it's actually paragraphs from a fantasy fanfiction novel. I decided to make separate videos for probably every witchcraft book that I'll be reading. I'll give my honest review, and I'll talk about any personal experiences that I'll have with the information given in the book, any spells that I try or techniques that I try.
So press the subscribe button so you won't miss any of that.
One word: patience. All that research takes time. Spells take time to work. Preparing a ritual takes time. Stopping yourself from buying all the cool stuff you see takes willpower. So much willpower. But also patience. Witchcraft can be boring, and beginners like me want to get to the cool part as fast as possible. And because of that, sometimes we skip steps. And the problem is that it might not be now, maybe it's in 10 years, but you'll have to go through the steps right back to that one step you've skipped and do it all over again, because that might just be the one thing that's keeping you from advancing your practice. Not to mention that when we skip steps in a craft, we might not get the results we wanted, and that disappointment will turn into quitting early. And maybe witchcraft was the right thing for you, but you lack the patience to keep on going. Skipping steps is actually how I failed a spell for the first time. It was something so small and so essential. And it goes to show you, it even takes time for these points to sink in. So be patient with yourself. Don't impulsively invest before you know what you want to stick with, at least for a while. We had to get to this one too. Witchcraft is full of shiny, sparkly, attention-grabbing things that just whisper to you, just buy us. And especially beginners, we fall into this trap of needing more and more and more because we feel like imposters, especially at the beginning. Not to mention sellers capitalize on that because they feed into this need for more and into this need for you to feel more like a witch. But it's not like you need all of them, and even if you did, as a beginner you shift so much through practices, through types of witchcraft, it would honestly be unadvisable for you to just continue making your wallet cry so much. Give that wallet a break. In fact, you don't even need tools to do magic, and most of the things you might want to try, you can make yourself. So don't hurry to acquire the next shiny thing you see. That being said, I feel like I have to share with the class. So, hi, I'm Kid and I have a problem. I am addicted to tarot decks. I already have a considerable number of tarot decks, and I do use all of them because I don't buy anything that I don't immediately connect to. but it's still a problem and it can still get dangerous. So I made a system to deal with this. First, I made a list of all the tarot decks that I want.
And to be honest, that list is becoming bigger and bigger by the day.
Anyways, I ordered that list according to availability first, because some tarot decks are not available for a really long time. And then I reordered that list according to the decks that I connect to currently, which means the decks that I'm interested in working with right now. And then I put buying tarot decks on the lowest priority on my shopping list. Of course, for this to work, I have an allocated amount of money every month for luxury things that I don't need, which is generally all the collections of things that I obsess over for no reason. So anything that I deem more important makes the list faster than the tarot decks, and this is how I don't uncontrollably feed into my addiction. And this way I also don't get the feeling of missing out, because I do have a plan of buying a deck that I want, and I also don't allow myself to just scroll in search of a deck when I want to buy a book, for example, and I feel maybe I could just add a deck to this. No, I have a set plan every month and I don't deviate from it.
Thank you for listening to this completely unimportant tidbit.
Moving on. Next up, we have a piece of advice that's a bit more tricky, and that's because it has people a little bit split on what exactly is recommended to do. And I personally think this split happens because of a difference in understanding of what a beginner witch actually is, or what do they actually know how to do. But first off, we have the people who recommend that you start right away. Go ahead, do your first spell. Nothing wrong is gonna happen. You're just getting over your fear of doing things wrong. Just do it. Just try it out. Basically, spend as little time as possible on that armchair. But on the other side, we have people who insist on you mastering a few steps before you go ahead and do your first spell. And this is mainly so you can avoid disappointment and maybe prevent that quitting early we were talking about before, but also out of a sense of protection first, safety first. And for this category, I compiled a list of pieces of advice that I named Before You Cast a Spell, like the book that's on my reading list, and I haven't gotten to it yet. I have no idea if this is in the book. Before you cast a spell, start with how to cast spells. How does witchcraft work? Witchcraft works by manipulating energy, influencing energy, and getting effective results. Now, to manipulate energy, you have to sense energy first. So that's where you start. Now, some people might have to start with meditation and learning how to visualize first. After that, there's focusing on yourself, on your own energy, a little bit of mindfulness, and grounding your energy, centering your energy, directing your energy, and then you can think about truly manipulating your own energy. Before you cast a spell, learn how to connect. You've learned how to sense your own energy. Well, let's sense other energies too. And now it's easier because you can now differentiate between what's you and what's other. It's kind of like going through the baby steps again. A baby is firstly connected to the mother and cannot differentiate between themselves and the mother. With time, they can start sensing that difference and they slowly disconnect and become their own person. And then they come into contact with the environment and they realize that there is an environment. There is something more different than themselves. That's when curiosity comes in. That's when the baby realizes that there's so much more to explore and there's so much more to play with, which goes through the same process in the beginning. To connect to others, you first have to sense others, and then you have to become curious. Be curious about everything around you. Open your eyes to perceive the world around you, and then be brave to go ahead and say, hi. The difference between how a baby sees the world and how you're trying to see the world to be able to do magic is that you're trying to see the world through a magical sense. You're trying to see energy, connect to energy, manipulate energy, and so on. A baby is meeting their material world that they're a part of. Now, I personally was lucky because I already knew how to meditate and I was a great visualizer.
Thanks, maladaptive daydreaming.
And I had no hang-ups in looking at the world through a different lens. Accepting that lens is true and real was a different thing. But as long as I pretended that I'm simply experimenting and playing around with ideas, it all worked out great. But actual connection to the environment, that was a lot harder to establish. And that's because I had to connect to myself, find my own energy, tolerate my own energy, then accept myself as a working part of the environment, and then accepting that there is an equal exchange between me and the environment, which means that at any point the environment can reach me just as I can reach the environment.
Thanks, dissociation.
If you have issues with personal safety, this whole process might feel triggering to you. It might even feel unusual or gross at the beginning. But as you get accustomed to other energies and you learn that there is safety out there and safety inside yourself, and you learn to actually recognize your own power and to stand in that power, things get easier and energies start to actually feel peaceful, and you might even be looking forward to real connection. Before you cast a spell, ask yourself, why are you casting the spell? The core or heart of the spell is your intent. You're giving the spell a purpose. So why are you doing the spell? What is the purpose that the spell is supposed to meet? It's important that you're as specific as possible and that maybe you look at this purpose from different perspectives first. And this might lead you to the next point. Before you cast the spell, ask yourself, how could this spell go wrong? Get in the habit of mentally testing your spell first. If your intent is not specific enough, the reaction to the spell might be greater than you thought. Or you might be getting what you want, but not through the means that you were thinking of. Let's take the example of a spell that's supposed to bring you money. Money comes in many forms, and it comes through very different means. You might find money on the street. You might be winning the lottery. You might be getting a new job or a promotion. Or Nana might die and you're getting an inheritance. A lot of times spells don't go wrong. They achieve your desired result in a way that you hadn't thought about. While we're on the subject, since these tips are also for your safety, think of protection before anything. And while protection can come in the form of charms and amulets and words and so on and so forth, it can also come in the form of being prepared for at least the most common scenarios that could happen. Half which asks a few important questions on this point. If you're summoning a spirit for working, do you know how to send it back? If this spirit is not doing what you want them to do you know how to stop them and send them back? What if the spirit that you're summoning is not the one who comes through? Do you have an answer to these questions? Personally, when I first heard these questions, I did not have an answer. And even now, I have a vague answer to these questions, and I have a feeling it would not be a widely accepted answer. Because I'm reckless. I'm the first to admit that I'm incredibly reckless. And that's because my personal philosophy is to give everyone a chance to express themselves in their truest form. Everyone gets to talk if they want to talk, and I want to hear what they're saying, and I'm going to decide after what I hear what they're saying, because I'm someone who wants to know and experience the truth, and because I'm someone who doesn't fear much of anything. And it's not out of a feeling of superiority over other entities or other people, but rather because I'm what you would call too curious for their own good. And this is why I did not concern myself with safety much. And whenever I would think about protection, my first reaction would be, but
what if I want to experience that negative energy? What if I want to work with that negative energy? What then?
And this perspective hasn't really changed much. In fact, I think it has been reinforced by me working through my religious trauma, because I did have some fear about doing or experiencing certain things that I did want to experience, but I was being stopped from. But eventually I learned that even if you're not planning on doing something or you don't completely agree with a certain practice, it's better to learn how to do it. It's better to know how to do something before you actually need it. So in my case, I am learning how to do protection spells. However, I'm trying to adapt them to suit my personal philosophy around what I want to experience. And I do want to make one thing clear. Protection should not be done out of fear, but rather from confidence and from respect for yourself and for your own boundaries and limitations. I used to have this preconceived notion that protecting yourself comes from fear. You doing protection measures means that you're afraid of that particular thing that you're trying to stop. And that would cause quite the dissonance in my brain, who refused fear and would refuse to lose the opportunity to experience or to do something because of protection measures. And then I realized, you lock the door because you're aware of the nature of some people around you and because you want to protect the things or the people that are valuable to you. It's out of respect for yourself and your own effort through which you have gathered those things that are valuable to you, and out of respect for the people you're responsible for. Setting these boundaries means you know what you want and what you don't want, and respecting yourself means knowing how to enforce these boundaries and when to enforce these boundaries. Protecting yourself is being aware of your own power and others' power and respecting both sides. One more thing about safety. A long chapter, I know. But some plants are poisonous, fire is dangerous, water breeds mold, smoke is not healthy, especially breathed in by pets or kids. Some materials are bad for the environment, and most things have an expiration date. So be careful what you burn, bury, or consume.
I set bay leaves on fire and I almost burned my house down.
Before you cast a spell, check the recipe. The ingredients in a spell are adaptable.
Maybe there are some rituals out there where you shouldn't change them in any way if you want the results that are written on paper.
But for most spells, you should use ingredients that you connect with in a way that's representative of the purpose that you're giving that ingredient. For example, I don't connect roses to love. Would I use roses in a spell related to love? No. I would find another ingredient. But at the same time, there is something that I thought about. A lot of herbs or plants have an actual demonstrated effect. For example, lavender. Lavender is a sedative. It calms your nervous system down and it induces sleepiness. Now, a lot of people use lavender for cleansing. I think you can use it for the actual effect of the plant in a spell that uses that particular effect. For example, using lavender in a sleep aid kind of spell. I'm not sure if this is true or this is possible, but think about it. Most of the time though, you should build a connection to the spirit or the energy of the plant first. Taking the lavender example again, I was made aware of the effect of lavender because I needed it and I have used it to treat insomnia. I have experienced the effect of lavender on myself, so I can connect to my experience of that effect very easily.
Now, I don't recommend using plants or herbs on yourself every time you're trying to connect to them.
Keep in mind that some of them are poisonous and some of them will make you really, really sick. But anyways, we're done with the before you cast the spell part of this video. Hopefully by this time you still want to cast the spell and you haven't quit yet. If you're still here, let's move on to the rest of the advice. Don't box yourself in from the very beginning. Whenever one starts something new, there's a feeling of excitement flaring in the beginner's mind. It's a good kind of anxiety, and it's the same for any practice. The beginner is allowed to make mistakes, to explore, to try everything out and fail in the name of learning. So truly use this opportunity. You don't have to practice a certain type of magic. You don't have to be a certain type of witch. You don't even have to be a part of a coven.
You don't need deities to do magic or to be a witch.
Expanding on that previous point about boxing yourself in, you also don't need to work with any deities to be a witch.
Except the god of research.
First of all, you don't need to be a part of a religion. Wicca is a religion. Witchcraft is a craft. Witchcraft is secular. You can be of any religion and be a witch at the same time. You can even integrate religious aspects into your practice. But deities are special. They're not for everyone, and they're definitely not for beginners because they complicate things. They require a lot of commitment that a beginner cannot possibly provide without stunting their exploration phase. And they require a lot of effort put in that can overwhelm a beginner. It's better to just leave them alone for a while. You're human first, so try connecting with that part of yourself first. Keep your practice simple and enjoy the simplicity of your practice first before you're trying to level it up. That being said, if you're reckless and you go headfirst into the unknown and then you wonder, why do things turn out like this? Well, you might not have much of a choice. I did not want to work with deities, and I still stumbled upon that path, and rather unconventionally so. But I guess I did get the best possible option for my circumstances, and it turned out to be exactly what I needed. And I still had a choice. I didn't have to work with this deity. I could have just refused, but I chose to do it anyways. Just keep in mind, unusual methods lead you to unusual results. And there might not be many people who had gone through the same experience that you have, which means that there might not be much information about it out there, and not much help either.
Journal. Journal everything.
Whether it's your dreams, shadow work, random ideas, your spells, your readings, your conversations with spirits, it doesn't matter. Write down everything. And actually, you don't even have to write anything down. Record it, film it, but save it safely. In fact, writing down your dreams might help you deepen your psychic abilities by deepening the connection to your subconscious. And writing down your spells means that you'll remember the final details and you can go back to it and write down the results, or adapt the spell if it's failed or you wanted to do something different. And this journal will be your only point of reference from now on. So if you ever feel disconnected from the craft, distanced from your practice, you can go back in time essentially and look back at that beginner excitement, that beginner mind, and maybe you'll feel the spark again. I personally write down all of my experiences, all of my spells, my rituals, all of the conversations that I have with the spirits that I work with, all the information that I want to keep written down into a physical journal first. And then I go back into it, I refine it, I compile it into little chapters that I transform into videos for basically my virtual book of shadows over here. And for this, I wish to do my part in the witchcraft community. And who knows, maybe it helps some people too.
Get used to not knowing and admitting to it, and then get used to failing.
As much as you learn on this path, there is just so much more that you don't know. This is working from the in-between, and admitting to the fact that you just don't know is the first step of learning. But this also means that you will fail a lot. So get into the mindset of treating failures as an excuse to be curious. Witchcraft is basically trial and error, and it's a lot of error. Be a scientist. Your spell failed? Well, go back to research, adapt it, and try again. I already had to do that. Fail, I mean. But with every spell, I learned something new. There's just small tidbits, details that you never thought about, and then you realize it as the spell is coming through. And with it, there's new facets of the world that unravel to me as well.
Closed practices are not for you.
That's it. Just leave them alone. However, there are gatekeepers for practices that are not closed. And for those I say, don't let anyone control or dictate what direction you're taking your practice in. You know what's right for your practice.
People won't understand what you're doing.
Witchcraft is highly misunderstood. There's so much fear mongering, and pop culture basically made witches seem inherently evil in people's eyes. So be careful who you disclose to, and if you do, expect there to be a lot of explaining to do. I personally talk about most things I do with my partner, and I'm lucky to have someone open-minded enough, even if he's not a spiritual person at all, and he would have never guessed that I would take this particular route with my life. The other person I disclose my practice to, though not in its entirety, is my sister, and that was an interesting experience because while she's heaps more spiritual than my partner is, she suffers from the same religious trauma that I went through. Regardless, I had to explain quite a bit with both people, and while I had overall positive experiences with disclosure, I would not disclose to anyone else in my life. And it's okay not to disclose it to anyone, ever, for any reason. And you should not feel afraid to be you, and nobody should make you feel afraid or ashamed of your practice. But we do live in the world that we live in.
Don't do anything with magic that you wouldn't do with your own two hands.
We're back with the witchcraft ethics class. Magic and witchcraft are not a way to avoid responsibility. Magic and witchcraft are not a way for you to do things that your human laws would stop you from doing. Magic and witchcraft are simply a support for you to achieve balance with the world and with yourself. Regardless of the magic you're using, the ethical way, or at least my understanding of it, is to use it as a helper to do what you would have done with your own hands anyways. Witchcraft and magic are just tools in the toolbox. So maybe don't judge magic and rather analyze the practitioner. After all, we're human, which means that we have to allow another human to exist around us just as freely as we wish to exist. Basically, respect each other so we can coexist peacefully.
Consider the mundane before the magical.
So, you have a problem. Let's say you have a very noisy, very annoying, very disrespectful neighbor. How about before you do a working to magically get that neighbor to leave, you employ the mundane solutions first. Follow the principles of escalation. You can first communicate your issue directly to the neighbor. When the neighbor doesn't listen, you go further. We have authorities, we have people responsible for that. If all mundane solutions fail, then we're looking at the magical. And this is where I personally believe that you should follow the same rules of escalation. So instead of going directly to making this neighbor leave the entire apartment complex or maybe even the city or something like that, how about we try to think of the actual problem we have, the noise this neighbor makes. Maybe we can look at that, or maybe we can look at the way this neighbor is talking to us or not listening to us when we're telling them about this problem. And if none of those things work, then it's okay to make this problem go away. I'm sure that to some people, making this neighbor leave magically seems like the most effective solution. But maybe it's my medical background telling me to consider the less invasive solutions first. There's also situations in which you can combine the magical with the mundane. Let's say you want to lose weight. You can obviously do that through changing your diet and using a specific training regimen. You can at the same time do workings to boost your energy levels, improve recovery, commit to a weight loss plan, cut ties to addiction, basically optimize the plan that you already have. But there is another situation where we have to be very careful and consider the mundane before the magical, and that is regarding signs. Signs from deities, signs from spirits, signs that things are going well or the opposite. Most of the time, it's not a sign. Apply the rule of three. First is happenstance, second is coincidence, and third, it's a pattern. And just to make things easier, don't consider social media for signs, because social media works on algorithms. So if you watched one video about, I don't know, Anubis, you'll be flooded with 100 more videos about Anubis. And in fact, you might even see posts related to Anubis on other social media platforms. And maybe you didn't even watch a video. Maybe you talked about Anubis and your phone heard you. So this considers social media. Your interest in Anubis can be a sign, but not the videos. There is only one instance in which I considered social media as a sign.
And I'm not even sure if this will make the video, because
I have recorded this video before, and when I went to edit it, this specific part in the video, the audio track for it, had no sound on it. The audio track existed, there was just nothing on it. So I'm not sure how this will go, but I'll give it a try. I feel good about it, so
let's see how it goes.
I have a tarot channel that I follow and watch for fun. Sometimes I even let the videos play in the background while I'm doing something else. But a few months back, every time I would choose to watch a video, regardless of the pile that I'm choosing, regardless of the decks she was using in the readings, in my reading, there would be at least one card with either feathers or wings on it. And I checked the other piles, did not have any. And I even checked the videos that I didn't feel like watching, and they also had not had any. Now the difference was that I would encounter this feathers or wings sign in other videos that I would watch, usually recommended videos that normally I wouldn't feel like watching, but somehow I was drawn to them in that particular month. And the most important part is that I knew whose signs those were, and I could see other signs in my daily life as well. Very insistent spirit, by the way. So the most, if you really want to, you can use the social media sign as just one of the three, never just it alone.
Don't compare your practice to others.
People have different amounts of energy. People have different daily lives. People practice a different kind of magic. They have different experiences. They have different amount of knowledge. There's no point in you comparing your practice to others. Your practice is unique because it is yours. Your own personal filter of your own life and your own experiences is transforming the magical practice in something that is purely yours. And in fact, you should make it as different and as unique as possible. Make it more and more yours.
This is a bit like worrying that your personality is not like other people's personality.
Of course it's not. And it shouldn't be, because it's you. It should be like you.
Make a daily practice.
This can be achieved in two ways. And actually, you can just combine the two. You don't have to stop at one. But some people prefer making a daily practice in the sense that they make a routine. They write in their journal, they give their offerings, they maybe even do a daily draw or a type of daily divination. But then you can also incorporate magic into your daily life. For example, stirring a sigil into your coffee, reading the tea leaves at the end of a cup of tea, wearing charmed jewelry, or maybe you can go even simpler, saying hi to the plants and to the trees when you go outside, or talking to your ancestors throughout the day. There's many ways in which you can simply incorporate magic into your daily life. And this is also a way for you to remain connected to your craft while maybe you don't have the energy to do big spells or rituals. And to be honest, this is the thing I am worst at. I have a really hard time keeping a routine, and it's just really hard for me to be mindful while I'm doing small tasks. I run on autopilot most of the time.
Thanks again, dissociation.
But hey, we're doing this step by step, right?
Embrace and accept change.
Magic will change you. In fact, everything new you do, even if you quit halfway through, will instill change into you. And to change and influence energy is to accept that you'll be changed in the process as well. Learn to be curious about change and welcome it in and keep learning, and eventually open the door and step through it, knowing that you'll come out different. And last but not least, this is the most important piece of advice on this list, courtesy of the Order of Chaos, and that is have fun.
And this is it. I'm done with this ridiculously long list.
I hope this helped you as much as it helped me understand what witchcraft and what being a witch means, and of course, where to start. I'm curious when I'll revisit this in like a year or so, how many of these pieces of advice I'll have learned the hard way. If you want to keep watching to see where this leads me, or maybe you want to feel less lonely while you're trying to learn the craft just like I'm trying to do, or maybe you're curious to see if I get dragged into the deepest parts of hell to dance funny dances for the devil for all of eternity, or maybe you want to laugh at the complete noob stumbling about, well then, click the like, click the subscribe, click all the buttons and comment, and see you in the next episode.